Yeah, we're ready to get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on Sunday. Sunday, right early in the morning. We'll be covering subject verb agreement today. Today's session will be a bit lighter than the previous sessions. So, there are two reasons for that. The first one is we're going to limit the theory a little bit, and we're also going to discuss a lot of points that are actually very easy to remember. So everything you see on the right hand side, it's actually pretty straightforward. All we need to do is, um, remember those points. The one on the left will take a little bit of discussion, but as you can see, it's a relatively small discussion. So, yeah, today's session hopefully will be lighter, especially compared to yesterday. Um, and by the time we end this session, we will take a look at the remaining 4 questions from your homework. All right. So, without further ado, let's get started. Now, the very first thing to remember with subject verb agreement is, forget everything else that you see on the screen. I basically want you to trust your ear on this. So, if you've been communicating in English, then over time you build up that sense, for what is right and what is wrong in terms of agreement. So I want you to trust your ear on this. That's the first thing. Now, in terms of actually looking for subject verb agreement, it may be worth pointing out that subject verb agreement is a thing only in the present tense. So if you're thinking about the past tense or the future tense, subject verb agreement does not even come into the picture. It is only in the present tense that you even start thinking about singular subject, singular verb, plural subject, plural verb. So, what is subject verb agreement? It is exactly that, singular, singular, plural, plural. And when you're looking at something called the third person singular, the verb changes. Basically, it's a very complicated way of saying that when you add an S to a noun, that noun typically goes plural. But if you add an S to a verb, typically that verb goes singular. All right. So, that said, let's get going. So, the first point we need to discuss is helping verbs, the presence of helping verbs. So, if you have a helping verb in a sentence, right, it is the helping verb that you'll need to look at when you're thinking about subject verb agreement. So, let's take a look at the example over here. So, the first example, please. He, she, it is working, right? Now, over here, the verb is working, where is the helping verb, and working is something called a present participle, that ing form. Now, the point is that ing form is not going to do anything when it comes to subject verb agreement. Whatever has to be done, it has to be done to the helping verb. Now, in this case, of course, he, she, it, we would say is working. But if you shift it to they, then what would change in the sentence? The helping verb would change. They are working. So, if you have a helping verb, either the helping verb is going to change or nothing is going to change. So, for example, he, she, it can work. The verb here is can work, where can is a helping verb, and work is that bare infinitive form. Why are we saying it's a bare infinitive form? Because you can never say he, she, it can works, right? You cannot add that S because this has to be in the simplest form. The word work has to be in the simplest form if it's preceded by can. Anyway, the bottom line is that, again, the can is not going to change irrespective of he, she, it, they. No matter what you do, it's going to be can work. This also applies to a few other verbs like could, should, would, may, might, will, shall, right? So these verbs that you can see in this list at the bottom. All right, so that is pretty straightforward. So let's summarize that. If you see a helping verb, then either the helping verb is going to change or nothing is going to change, irrespective of your subject. Okay, carrying on, let's look at and both and. Now, we already know that and is the most common coordinating conjunction around. Now, when you say X and Y, And basically joins two things, X and Y. So whatever your subject is, it is no longer X, it is no longer Y, it is X and Y. The subject is X and Y together. And that's exactly how we should remember it. I mean, there's no extra effort we need to make over here. We expect to go plural on this because it doesn't matter whether you're joining one thing to multiple things or multiple things to multiple things or one thing to one thing. It doesn't matter. It'll become plural. That said, small but discussion over here. In English, although this is a very reliable rule that X and Y will go plural, there are very specific circumstances under which even X and Y will not go plural. So X and Y might be considered to be one thing. Now, as far as I know, the GMAT doesn't make too much of an effort to test this. So for all practical purposes, I think we should be okay saying that, X and Y together is going to be plural. And the same thing applies to both X and Y. All right. So as I said, till now, nothing overly complicated. This is just simple stuff. You have to memorize everything on the right hand side. It's just very simple. We just have to kind of remember it. Let's continue with a few other conjunctions. Or, nor, either or, and neither nor. Now, with these conjunctions, what we need to do is we need to check the noun closest to the verb. Just give me 1 second. Just going to get back to that example. Yeah, now it'll fit on the screen. Now, if you take a look at this sentence, the CEO or the board of members, right now you've got an or over there and it's joining two nouns. What are the two nouns it's joining? CEO and board of members. I'm sorry, the board members. Now, the verb is represent. Represent is closer to the board members than it is to CEO. And therefore, it's going to agree with board members. Relatively easy to apply. In case you're wondering why this happens, there's no real reason for it. This is just a convention in English. So with and, you're going to get multiple things, right? Practically speaking. With or, you are joining two things, but the convention in English is to make the verb agree with the closest noun. And that's why in the second one, when we've swapped the positions of CEO and board members, now CEO is closer to represents, and therefore it has to be represents. So CEO singular, represents is singular. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable till now? All right, I've got a few answers. Rahul, Abhishek, Manu, Ujali, Ankit, perfect. All right, now the next one is prepositional phrases. Now, prepositional phrases are different from conjunctions. They don't literally join things like structurally. So, there are some prepositional phrases like as well as that logically join things, but we won't assume that they structurally join things. Now, this is something we're going to have to discuss a little bit, right? But let's discuss the basic point first. So remember those prepositional phrases that I said you don't really have to memorize, right? I stand by that. You don't really have to make an effort to memorize prepositional phrases. If I say something like this, the students in the class. Now over here, students is a noun and in the class is a prepositional phrase. So if we say the students in the class, obviously we're going to say the students in the class are. We're never going to say the students in the class is, even though class may be considered singular. Now, most prepositional phrases are well behaved in the sense that they don't affect subject-verb agreement. So for most cases, you can ignore prepositional phrases when it comes to subject-verb agreement. There's a small exception. There's something called a group of san-am pronouns. We'll get to those in a few minutes, and the discussion there will also be slightly complicated. But here, at least, everything is simple. Now, here are some examples of some prepositional phrases that may be confusing, but we should remember that they still don't affect the subject. So, for example, take a look at as well as. So, what's the first one over here? Let's read the entire list. As well as, accompanied by, with, along with, coupled with, together with, besides, in addition to, and including. I just want to spend an extra second on that last one, including. So just let's come out of subject verb agreement for a second. Including is one of those words that people generally consider to be an ing modifier. And I know we've not discussed ing modifiers yet, but later on you might have this question. Hey, I'm looking at this word including. Is it kind of like a complicated modifier? Do I need to apply rules to it? The answer is no. So in our classes, we consider the word including a preposition. So the bottom line is, whenever you see including in a sentence, you don't have to apply any complicated rules around it. It's just a way of introducing examples, including. There's nothing extra to be done with this word. All right. Now let's come back to subject verb agreement. Let me put this sentence closer to the center of the screen. So let me outline it as well. She, as well as her friends. Now, as well as we just discussed, is a prepositional phrase. It is different from and. If you say she and her friends, that's different. She and her friends, and ends up joining those things. But when you say she as well as her friends, although this is logically joining those things, it is not actually joining them structurally. The bottom line is, like other prepositional phrases, we have to ignore this prepositional phrase when we're looking at subject verb agreement. In other words, mentally remove that as well as part and just check, what do we say? She is watching a movie or she are watching a movie? Clearly, we have to say she is watching a movie. So that's what we do with prepositional phrases in general. We end up ignoring them when it comes to checking for subject verb agreement. Now, take a second to look at this sentence or this example. Just the first one, the samples sentence. Take a while to read it, but my question to you is basically, are you comfortable with this sentence? The first one. Uh, from hundreds of samples, has this result been obtained? Does it seem okay to you or does it sound weird? Okay, Rahul saying okay. Abhishek saying fine, but slightly strange. From hundreds of samples, has this result been obtained? Ojali saying slightly strange. Inverted are weird in general, sure. Manu saying it sounds okay. Okay, fair enough. This happens with prepositional phrases sometimes, and this can make it slightly harder for us to spot the subject. In these kinds of structures, when you start with a prepositional phrase and you've switched the order of the subject and verb, we have to remember, of course, we should not make a small mistake like samples is somehow going to be linked to the verb. Samples has nothing to do with the verb. If we straighten the sentence out, the sentence would be, this result has been obtained from hundreds of samples. So, samples, hundreds of samples is just the object of the preposition. It's not the subject of the verb. So, the subject of the verb remains this result, even if it's on the right hand side. So, this is just a small thing you have to watch out for. Sometimes they do inversion. With inversion, you have to make an extra effort to find the subject. It's not it's not in the normal subject first order that you see in English. Okay, now we've come to Either and neither. Okay, let me quickly check if you remember your rules. What was the rule for either or and neither nor? Feel free to unmute yourself and tell me. Either or and neither nor.
Sir, the verb will the verb will go with the nearest noun, मतलब or.
Uh, I'm sorry, the verb will go with the nearest or?
मतलब verb will go with or. मतलब the noun after or.
Um, okay, so the way you're remembering it is not bad, right? You can say the noun after or, so the noun on the right hand side of or, but that is not 100% necessary. So there are structures in which the verb will agree with the first noun because the first noun will be closer to the helping verb. Um, but let me not get into that. I've never seen a situation like that on the GMAT. But the better way to remember this is the verb will agree with the closest noun. So don't remember it in terms of or, remember it in terms of the verb. So whatever's closer to the verb, that's what the verb will agree with. Okay, so I get that you guys probably do remember that rule, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Right now, what we're discussing is either and neither without the or and nor. So, what we discussed earlier is that and is a conjunction, or is a conjunction, nor is a conjunction. Either or is a correlative conjunction, neither nor is a conjunction. Right now, what we're discussing is either and neither without their associated or and nor. When they are used without or and nor, they can be multiple things. They could be adverbs, they could be pronouns, they could be adjectives, right? Now, you don't need to remember these terms. The bottom line is when it comes to subject verb agreement, if either is with your subject, it's going to be singular. Let's take a look at the possible patterns when either is in that subject position. Either could be an adjective. Now, when is it an adjective? When it's combined with a singular noun. So, what is the example here? Either room is acceptable, right? As we said, go singular. Nobody's ever going to say either room are acceptable. So, you don't even need to make an effort to remember this. Let's come to the second one. Either can be used alone, right? With nothing else. You can just use either. You can just say either is acceptable, or you can say neither is acceptable, right? So either and either can be used alone and they're still singular. Now for the last one, either and neither can be followed by of plus a plural noun. We'll take an extra second over here. The rest were easy because they fit with, what we would normally say. I'm going to ask you guys to tell me whether the second sentence, the one with a warning sign next to it, I want you to tell me whether the second sentence sounds okay or not. There's no right or wrong answer here. So I'm not testing you. I am actually interested in asking you whether the second sentence sounds okay. Okay, so I've got multiple answers over here. Sounds okay. Right. So this usage has become more acceptable over time, right? But the traditional view of either and neither is that they are singular. So if you feel you are being tested on this, I would strongly urge you to go singular, even if the plural one sounds okay. But that said, I personally would not make it an absolute. Probably look at this as like a level 3 or something. I would try to delay taking a decision on this if I could. All right, so yeah, just to bottom line this, that last one with the warning sign where we are going plural on either, it's traditionally considered to be wrong. Okay, so let me be clear about that. It's traditionally considered wrong. But if you want to be like a little more flexible on this, you could say that, yeah, I'll be careful about it, but I'm not going to be completely, I'm not going to close my mind entirely to that possibility. All right. Now let's move to each. Each is each is very similar to what we just discussed with one exception. Anyway, let's quickly summarize the similarities to either and neither. So each can be used alone, right? Each can be used with a singular noun. That's what you see in these three examples on the right hand side. So let's quickly summarize. Each can be used alone without anything else. Each can be used before a singular noun, and each can be followed by of plus a plural noun. In all three cases, the verb is singular. This should not be a problem. I don't think any of us is ever going to say each of the rooms are acceptable, right? We'd say each of the rooms is acceptable. So each just kind of talks about everything one by one. So that's what we would absolutely expect. Now, just for the sake of having a complete discussion, let's take a quick look at a specific usage of each that has been tested very rarely. Like in all the questions released till now, I think there are just two questions that have tested this ever, right? So I'm not sure whether they're still testing it or not, but the point is it's easy to remember. That rule is if each comes after a plural subject, right? Then you don't look at that each. The each is irrelevant. The verb will be plural. So, I mean, it goes without saying that each cannot come after a singular subject. So, I could never say something like the room each is acceptable. The room each is acceptable, right? So, that's the first thing. Each cannot be used after a singular subject, but each can be used after a plural subject. And when that happens, the verb is plural. Now, the rule is very easy to remember. But if you don't remember it, and if a question tests you on this, it might be hard to apply because most of the times I get the feedback that this sentence sounds wrong. Quick check. What do we think about this sentence? The rooms each are acceptable. Okay, Ojali saying okay. Manu saying doesn't sound okay. Abhishek is sound okay. Ankit saying weird. Yeah, I get that. It probably will sound weird. Again, when do things sound weird? Rahul saying weird but okay. When do things sound weird? When we haven't encountered them often enough. Once we come across something often enough, we're like, yeah, I know that. I know that it's possible, right? So remember, the rule is easy. So don't get thrown off by this. In case, again, I don't think you'll get tested on this. This is very rare. But in case it comes up, just remember the rule is very easy. If each comes after a plural noun, the verb is plural. Now, let's take a look at some. It's a group called indefinite pronouns. As always, you don't need to remember this term indefinite pronoun, right? There's just a few very small things we need to discuss here. Now, I will not have good answers for some of these things, right? I'm letting you know that beforehand before we get into this discussion. But other things over here are just absolutely straightforward, not even worth discussing right now. If you look at these words, the first ones, the ones that say always singular, another, anybody, anyone, anything, either, everybody, everyone, little, much, neither, nobody, no one, none, nothing. These words are considered singular, right? So I'm going to deprioritize this. Not going to ask you to make an effort to remember this because you will never make a mistake with this. You know, I don't see any of you ever saying something like, everyone are invited, right? Everyone are, it's got to be everyone is, right? So I'm not going to even spend any extra time on this unless any of you, have a question on this. And the second category is also super easy. These words are always plural, like both, few, many. You would say many are. You would never say many is. So again, not going to spend any time on this. This is ultra simple, right? But now let's come to the last one, the one that I said I'll not have good answers for. Now, let me help you understand what we're looking at over here. We're looking at a small group of words called the Sanam pronouns. And you can see why they're called Sanam. It's some, any, none, all, and most. Now, the point over here is that with these words, like with some, right? Let me just put up a sentence. Now, I haven't put a complete sentence over here, but just to help you see what I'm trying to say, some of the water, some of the students, right? So that some over there is I mean, it doesn't really have any singular plural of its own. You need to look you need to look at water and students, right? Ah, water is singular. So you would never say some of the water are, right? That's not a problem. So some of the water is, that's perfect. We're not going to have any problems with this. But what happens when you have a plural noun with some? Some of the students, right? Now, we're not yet at the difficult part. We're still at the very easy part. Let me ask you, is anybody here about to say some of the students is? Anyone? Let me get a quick yes or no. Some of the students is. Okay, so I've got no, and no. Ujali? Any chance of saying some of the students is?
Prob like 99% no, but I don't know if there
Right,
be a case. Actually, I think I've at some point either heard it or read it in some context, but I can't recall. But I think I'm
right.
not
But
100% sure.
but just by gut instinct, if I said something like some of the students is watching a show, right?
No,
You'd probably find
probably
that,
not.
yeah, exactly. That's what we're saying. So we're typically not going to have a problem with a word like some. But now let me draw your attention to the word none. None of the water is not a problem, right? So when the noun is singular after a sanam pronoun, it's not an issue. It'll always be singular. But now let me open this up and you guys can feel free to unmute yourselves. None of the students, what do you want? Is or are? None of the students is watching a TV show. None of the students are watching a TV show. What do we want to go with? Okay, Ankit is saying is, Abhishek is saying is, okay. I mean, I'll be straightforward over here. I would probably say none of the students are. Manu is saying are. Rahul saying are. Fair enough. And I think Ujali is giving it a thought. Um, let
I
me.
think I would say
Hmm,
are.
are, right? Fair enough. So let me give you a little bit of background on this. A lot of test prep resources are going to tell you that all the Sanam pronouns work like this. You just check the noun, right? Some of you may have even come across that advice. But in English, things are not always that straightforward. Very specifically, there is an exam called the SAT exam. You guys may have heard of it, the SAT, right? So, just a few years back, they actually tested this none of the plus plural noun. And the correct answer there went singular, not plural. The reason for this is the singular one is the more traditionally accepted usage of none. Now, whether that's correct or not correct, I'm not going to get into that. This is just their opinion that, hey, yeah, let's follow the traditional usage of none. They're like, yeah, let's just do it. Now, that was one exam, right? The SAT, that's a much bigger exam than the GMAT, right? So this was a much bigger deal when it happened. But let's come to the GMAT because that's what we're interested in. Now, on the GMAT, I have never seen this tested. Not yet, at least, in any of the questions released till now. That means we don't have a definite line from the GMAT as to whether they think none should be singular or plural when used with a plural noun. But they have used none plus of plus plural noun in the non underlined part of the sentence. And over there, surprise, they went singular. So, my advice to you is none should probably not be treated as a sanam pronoun. Um, but whether, I mean, do I have any evidence to back that up? Not really, right? Maybe the GMAT will continue not testing you. In case they ever test you, my advice would be go singular. So even though while speaking, I'm probably going to go plural with none, um, my advice to you would be go singular. Again, as I said, this discussion, I don't have any straight answers for you guys, don't have any good answers. But just a quick check, are we comfortable with the level of ambiguity that we have with none when it comes to Sanam? Okay, Ankit's okay with it. Rahul's okay with it. Yeah, because I really can't do better because we don't really have any information on which to base our, advice. So this is pretty much the best I could do. Manu and Ujali, quick check. Manu's also okay with it.
Yeah, I'm fine. So
Mhm.
if any of the others, barring none, are plural, then it is plural, and none behaves differently.
No, I want you to be careful
No.
with all the Sanam pronouns.
Okay.
Uh, some of them, like some, are much more reliable than others, right? But it's hard to say. For example, even if I take something like all, right? There are situations in which we could come up with exceptions. So this is something that, again, you're going to come across it. Like, I don't stop any of my students from referring to other test prep resources. So my point is, you're probably going to come across this, and they're probably going to say this. Yeah, SANAM is absolutely everything is the same, right? There's no exception. It's always the same applied like this. All I'm saying is that if we think a little more about it, I can't guarantee that. So it's really hard to say. On the others, I don't even have, it's like none. At least I have some evidence, right, from the non-underlined portion. The others, I don't even have that, so I don't even discuss those others because then it would just come down to my personal opinion.
Okay.
But that said, let's come back to things that are much more clearly defined. And yeah, these are just some miscellaneous points. I'm going to go through them one by one. The first one is a dummy it. We saw a dummy it yesterday. We saw it in multiple situations. Dummy its are always singular. So, easy one to remember. If you ever use a placeholder it or a dummy it, it's always going to be singular. Now, the next one is another structure that we saw a lot of that structure in the previous session, a that noun clause. Guess what? That noun clauses are also always singular. Infinitives are also always similar. Singular. So, small example. You might have heard this sort of saying, to err is human, right? What's the subject of the sentence?
Two.
Absolutely. And that subject is an infinitive. What is an infinitive? To plus the simplest form of the verb. So we're not saying errs, erring, erred. We just have the simplest form of er after to. That's an infinitive. Now, of course, it probably is not even important to ask you, but would we ever say to err are human? No, right? So I've got 2, 3 answers over here, and yeah, that's because just by our just by sound, we know how to deal with infinitives. All we've done here is just put that rule down in case we need to remember it. Infinitives as subjects are always singular. So the verb will be singular. Now, gerunds are always singular. What are gerunds? Gerunds are ing forms that function as nouns. So let's take an example. If I say driving cars, and I give you a choice, driving cars is fun, driving cars are fun. Which one should we go for? Is perfect. That was a very fast answer. I got a lot of answers, 3 answers very quickly. Now, just the discussion is not over yet. So the answer depends on what you are trying to say. Now, obviously, let me be clear. The answer is, right? I'm not disputing that. But there are two ways of looking at driving cars. Like if you say driving cars, cars could be the less important word and driving could be the more important word. That makes it a gerund, driving cars. This is meant to be read as the driving of cars. The driving of cars, right? So driving is an ing that acts as a noun. How do you know it's acting as a noun? Because you're putting it after the. That's your noun test right there. Now, it's acting as a noun, but it's implying an action. That's what a gerund does. It acts as a noun, but implies an action. The driving of cars, it's very easy to see that now we're focusing on the word driving. We will never say the driving of cars are fun. We would say the driving of cars is fun. But in a slightly different sentence, for example, if I say self-driving cars, self-driving cars, right? Now over here, what you see is you don't have a gerund anymore. Self-driving is an adjective for cars. So my bottom line point over here is if you see an ing followed by a noun, right, don't immediately assume that the ing is the more important thing. The ing may just be an adjective, right? So use your judgment and check what they are trying to say. What are they focusing on? Is it the ing or is it the noun that they're focusing on? Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with this? All right. I've received 4 yeses, and Ajali is also saying yes. Perfect. So everyone's on board. Excellent. Now, the next one is collective nouns. Collective nouns are nouns that refer to a group of people or things collectively, together. So words like assembly, audience, or my favorite, class, right? Like if you say class. Now, how many of you would be comfortable saying the class are seated? The class are seated, or would you say the class is seated? Feel free to unmute yourselves in case this is something that is not just a simple yes or no for you, or you feel both are okay. Okay, Ankit is saying is, Rahul is saying is with a question mark. Okay, Abhishek is saying are. Fair enough. Fair enough. Ujali is saying both sound okay. Okay. Manu, the usage of the will change it. No, you have to use the with class. You can't say class is seated or class are seated. It has to be the class is seated or the class are seated. Now over here is then, right? Okay, fair enough. Over here, we need to keep just like a small point in mind in case the R sounds okay to us. R is slightly more common in British English than in American English. So in American English, I think it's safe to say that collectives generally tend to go singular. And if I think about it, even in British English, I think it's safe to say that collectives generally go singular. But the relative usage of the plural with the collective in British English is slightly more common. Anyway, the bottom line is that we probably want to go singular on collectives. So the class is seated. But I don't want you to lock yourself into thinking that collectives are always singular. So I want you to be a little open minded on this. Let me give you an example. So, the traditional way to decide whether you go singular or plural on collective nouns is to ask yourself, is the group acting together or is it acting as individuals? Let me give you an example. The class, and over here, I'm going to give you two options, is or are taking its or their GMAT or GMATs, as the case may be. Okay, now what do we go for? Abhishek is going for R and there. Fair enough. And the rest of us are thinking about it. Okay. Okay. I mean, both are grammatically correct. You're going to have to take a meaning call. Ankit is sticking with is. Ujali is going with R and there. Rahul, yeah, absolutely. Rahul, would we say the class is taking its GMAT or would we say the class are taking their GMATs? Is and its. Okay. Okay. Um, Rahul and Ankit, if you could unmute and tell me, and Manu also, if you could unmute and tell me, are you applying a rule over here or are you reading the sentence naturally and just telling me what it sounds like?
So a little bit of both actually. Since class being a collective, so I'm going with,
Mhm.
and it sounds natural as well if I speak out loud.
Okay, so Rahul's given us an opinion. I see that Manu and Ankit have also unmuted. Manu, go ahead.
So I'm taking the class as one unit, and reading the sentences that they're doing this activity together as one. So that's why singular.
Okay, okay. Ankit?
Yeah, actually, the test is taken by everybody. So I think
Mhm.
each one of the each one of the student in the class. So each is the
Mhm.
focus here. So it will get singular.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Um, I think all of you have understood it. So you're saying, okay, is this like an activity they're performing together or not? But the answer to that is they're not performing it together. They're not. This is not a group activity. This is not a. It's not like everyone is taking the same GMAT together as a group. It's all individuals taking their own GMATs. So the answer over here would actually be the class are taking their GMATs, not the class is taking its GMAT. So the class is not taking a GMAT as a group. They're all acting as individuals over here. Rahul, Manu, and Ankit, quick check. Are we comfortable thinking about it this way?
So not just GMAT. In any exam,
Mhm.
we can apply this rule, right?
I don't know about any exam. I'm specialized only in the GMAT.
No,
So
I mean,
just to clarify, the GMAT official guide in its theory section makes it clear that collectives can go plural depending on the need, right? So that is what I'm basing what I'm telling you on. So normally when I give you personal opinion or things that I'm not sure about, I tell you that. This I'm pretty sure about because the OG has mentioned it. But yeah, please go ahead.
my question was that here we
Mhm.
know that the GMAT is not a group activity because we
Right.
know the meaning of this exam and what we usually do in this exam. But if there is any case where we don't know whether the activity is a group activity or something like the GMAT, so in those cases, what should we do? Because for this specific example, I got it that the answer is are in there. But if I don't know whether the activity is a group activity or not, then what should be done?
I wouldn't expect the GMAT to put you in that situation
Okay.
where you can't take a meaning call on this. Remember, it's a meaning call, right? Um, and the reason I'm telling you that the GMAT probably would not put you in this kind of situation is all their questions are tested, right? So I think all of you already know that out of your 36 questions in verbal, only 30 are real questions, right? So most of you may already know this. The remaining six are called experimental questions. They are literally questions that the GMAT wants to test, experiment with, check how good they are, how bad they are, whether any changes need to be made, so that they can be developed for use in future GMATs, right? And each question is given to thousands of students. I mean, each experimental question is given to thousands of GMAT test takers. If there is a problem in the sense that it's hard, or should I say impossible, to figure out the meaning, we would expect such questions to be caught during the experimental stage. So, Rahul, if the question makes it through to the actual GMAT, it means that other people like you, test takers, actual test takers, not GMAT question writers or anything like that, actual test takers found that they could take the decision. Make sense? Yeah, awesome. All right. So, yeah, collectives, singular. Now let's come to the last three, a number of versus the number of. Now, this one is easy to remember. A number of is an idiomatic way of saying some or many. I mean, the number is not defined, but the point is a number of is a way of saying some. When you say a number of people, you're not literally talking about a number, you're trying to say some. So you would say a number of people are. So some people are, right? So a number of plus plural noun, it will be plural. But when we say the number of people, like the number of is an actual number. It is not an idiomatic way of saying some. It is literally a number. So when we say the number of, we need to go singular. A number of plural, the number of singular. Now we come to something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, the majority of plus plural noun. Don't worry about the, it can be a also. But the point is majority of plus plural noun. Now, if I say the majority of MBAs, what do you feel sounds better? The majority of MBAs is or are consultants? Ujjal is going straight away with R. Rahul's going with R. Okay. Everyone seems to be going with R. Manu? Or Manu's not sure. He's thinking about it. Um, oh, Manu's also going with R. Fair enough. Okay, this was much easier than I thought it would be. Uh, yeah, so you guys already know this then. The majority of plus plural noun goes plural. And the final one, quantities. So in terms of time, money, distance, weight, generally singular. So if you're talking about time, money, distance, weight, you generally tend to go singular. This is not a hard and fast rule, but generally singular. All right. So that brings us to the end of the right hand side. As I said, the right hand side is relatively straightforward. It just needs memorization.
So
Ankit,
one question, sir.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I've seen some questions. They are putting the numbers of. So, is it wrong, or the numbers of has to be the what we say, the verb has to the verb has to be singular plural according to the context.
So when you say the numbers of, right, there are two different ways to use it. One is an idiomatic way of referring to the population,
Hmm.
right? The other is literally the numbers, where you are looking at the plural of the word number,
Okay.
right? So we'll go plural on that. That's I think not a contentious issue,
Okay.
right? So the numbers of, feel free to go plural on that. So hang on, let me ask you: does that fit with your understanding, or do you think there's something more to it, or they've
If it
used
is
it differently.
if it is referring to population, say if
Mhm.
it is referring to population, then it has to be singular, because population as a whole is a collective noun.
No, 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 no. Population is singular, but when you say the numbers of, that'll go plural.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Okay.
Okay. Um, Whenever you find that again, just take a look at it and
Okay.
check whether it fits with what we've discussed. If it doesn't, let me know and I'll be sure to look into it.
Okay, sir.
Awesome. All right. So that is it for the right hand side, the easy part. Now let's go to the slightly more involved discussion on the left hand side. Now, yesterday we came across relative pronouns. We discussed that relative pronouns basically fall into two structures. So, first of all, okay, let me revise this because we did this just yesterday. So, most of you may not have had time to revise this just yet. So, what we discussed is there are three important relative pronouns: who, that, and which. Of which, of course, the most important are that and which. Now, there are a few other words like when, where. These are called relative adverbs. Again, not important right now. Relative pronouns, who, that, and which, start things called relative clauses. What are relative clauses? Relative clauses are dependent clauses that describe some noun before them. So let's just put a quick sentence up over here. The boat that sank yesterday was a yacht. Right, the boat that sank yesterday. So the that sank yesterday, right? These three words form a relative clause. They have to be looked at as an element. That those three words are just one element in a sentence, and that element acts as an adjective for a noun. What noun over here? Of course, the boat. Now I probably don't need to um, like say this again because most of you probably recognize this, that sank yesterday is describing the boat. But before we proceed, I want to be absolutely sure of that. So just a quick yes or a no in case we're able to recognize. So my question is, are we comfortable saying that sank yesterday is basically describing the noun boat? It's a dependent clause that's describing the noun boat. Okay, I received 5 yeses. Perfect, excellent. Now we can carry on. That, so I'm using that, but what I mean is a relative pronoun. That has no plural form. So relative pronouns have no plural forms. You cannot say the boats those sank yesterday. It still has to be the boats that sank yesterday, right? So just by sound, you know that there's no chance you can say the boats those sank. Why is that? Because relative pronouns have no plural form. Now, when you have a relative pronoun, as we discussed yesterday, there are two possible structures. Either you see relative pronoun, which in our case is that, plus a verb, or you see relative pronoun, again, let's just take that as an example, plus subject plus verb. So these are the two possibilities. And these are the only two possibilities after a relative pronoun. You can get a verb or you can get a subject plus verb. When you get only a verb, we said the relative pronoun is the subject of that verb, right? And when you get a subject plus verb after the relative pronoun, we said the relative pronoun is the object of which verb? This verb. So, very easy to remember. Relative pronoun followed by only a verb, the relative pronoun is the subject. Relative pronoun followed by a subject and a verb, the relative pronoun is the object. It is not the subject anymore because you have a subject after the relative pronoun. All right. Now, for the first rule, the first rule is when you have a relative pronoun used as the subject. Again, when is it the subject? When you have only a verb after it. When a relative is used as the subject, then because it has no singular or plural form, takes its singular or plural signal from the noun that it refers to. Sounds extremely complicated, but it's actually very easy to apply. All we're saying is, we're just saying this much, that you look at the noun that the who points to, and that noun will determine whether the verb needs to be singular or plural. So the manager is looking for an analyst who has. Now, who is the verb for? I'm sorry, has is the verb for who, but who takes its signal from analyst. Analyst is singular, so has will be singular. Now, the second one, just by sound, I'm pretty sure that it sounds really bad. The manager is looking for an analyst who have some knowledge. This is wrong. You'd have to say some analysts who have some knowledge, because if have is plural, then analysts also should be plural. Quick check. Let me have a yes or a no on this. Let me know if you're comfortable. Okay, I've received 2 or 3 yeses. Abhishek's also okay with it, and Ujali's also comfortable with it. Very good. All right, now let's go to the next one. The next one is something called the SVV pattern. This is something we briefly looked at yesterday, and all we said at that time was, this is a discussion that we're going to park till the next session. Right? Well, now we're going to take this discussion. What I want you to do, so before we even start, what I want you to do is, I want you to look at this sentence. Right? Just read it, nothing else. You just have to read the sentence. You can check whether you're comfortable with it, but right now all I need is for you to read the sentence. In the meantime, I'm going to put up a couple more examples. The movie that you said was good, the movie that you watched was good. Okay, now that you've read that initial sentence, I want you to read these 2 things that I've put down over here. While you're reading it, I'm going to go ahead and mark some of these things. Subject, verb, verb, subject, verb, verb. All right. Now, before we discuss anything else, my first question to you is, one of these is a complete sentence. Which one? And of course, please feel free to unmute yourselves.
Second one is the complete sentence.
Okay, Ankit's going with the second one. Abhishek is also going with the second one. Rahul is also saying the second. Yeah, so let me be clear. This is not a trick question. You can go by sound if you want. Okay, Manu is saying second one. So when I say which of the following is a complete sentence, basically what I'm asking is, which of the following would you be happy saying and then putting a full stop after it? So the first one, the movie that you said was good. Can we put a full stop after that? That's the question. The movie that you watched was good. Does that sound complete? That's the question. Ujali, quick check. Okay, Ujali is also going for the second one. Perfect. Now, very quickly, would you all agree that the only difference between these 2 structures, so first of all of you are right. Would you agree that the only difference between these 2 is the verb that we have over here, said versus watched? Right? That's the only difference. Otherwise, they are word for word exactly the same. All right. So yeah, Ujali is confirmed. Now, what you see is a relative pronoun followed by a subject, verb, verb. Now, normally this is not something you would ever expect to see. subject, verb, verb, you would expect to see subject, verb, and verb, right? But let's set that aside. Whenever this happens, then after a relative pronoun, you see a subject and a verb, what you need to do is you need to isolate the first subject verb combination and you need to check whether the verb inside the first subject verb combination is capable of working with the noun that the relative pronoun refers to. Is it capable of describing or being used to describe that noun? In the case of our example, this is how it would work. The first subject verb is you said or you watched. Now take your time and let me know which of these two verbs is capable of being used with the noun that the that is referring to. Okay, I've got a couple of answers. Watched. Rahul's also saying watched. That is absolutely correct. The movie that you watched, yeah, absolutely. The movie that you said, you can't say a movie. So the first one is not capable of working with that noun. Now, if that verb is not capable of working with that noun, then mentally you need to remove the first subject verb combination. It means you haven't had a chance to introduce the description yet. So whatever your that was doing, right? The that was trying to describe the noun, that description hasn't even come in yet. It's still to be done. So when you see SVV and the first SV cannot work as part of a description for the noun that the that is pointing to, mentally you remove it. This structure is meant to be read as RP plus V. That's it. This is actually reducible to that form. So this is not a new structure. SVV is not a new structure. SVV could just be V, RP plus V. Now, I just hearing myself, I think the way I've put it is not very clear. But let me just try again. If you see SVV, you need to check whether the first SV is part of the description or not. How do you do that? You check whether the verb is capable of working in a description to describe the noun that the that is pointing to. If it is, then the SV has to be kept. It is part of the description. So the that plus SV, that is the relative you're looking at. But if the verb doesn't work, then mentally you remove it and you move on to the next verb. The next verb will be the description, part of the description that the that introduces. Quick check. I understand I may not have put it across very clearly, so please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your doubts.
So, sorry, if we drop it, then also the sentence is fine. First one is fine.
Say that again.
If we drop the subject verb pair that you said, then the sentence is also fine, right?
In the first one or the second one?
The first one, first one.
No, because the first one would not be a sentence. Remember, you only told me that you and everyone else told me the second one is a sentence. The first is not a sentence.
Yeah, yeah. First one is a second one is a sentence. First one is not a sentence. But like you said, subject verb pair of the first sentence is not making sense with the movie. The movie cannot be said, right? And now if we drop the subject verb pair, you said the movie that was good. Yeah, okay, okay. And not a
So
sentence.
basically what we're saying is the descriptive element in the first one is that was good. Right? The descriptive element in the second is that you watched. So the was, in the second one, the was is not part of the description. That's why it is a complete sentence, because the was is now free to combine with the movie. Do you see? Because the was is not occupied in the descriptive element, it's now free to give you the verb for the subject, for the independent clause. But in the first one, because the first subject verb was not part of the description, the verb, the second verb, actually needed to be part of the description, which means there is no free verb left for your subject. And that is why all of you said that the second one is the complete one.
Yeah.
right? Awesome. Now, in case you're wondering, in the first one, right, the you said, what role does the you said play then if it's not part of the description? Well, what it's doing is it's just a way to pull it back a little bit. Whatever you're saying, it's a way to pull it back. Now, if I say a movie that was good, right? A movie that was good, that's an absolute statement. The movie was good. I'm not qualifying it in any. Qualifying means to, pull it back a bit. So I'm not qualifying that statement in any way. The movie that was good, right? But if I say the movie that you said was good, what I'm saying is the was good is not an absolute description. It is in your opinion. So whenever I say something like the movie that I said was good, the movie that I thought was good, right? In fact, let me put that down. The movie that I thought was good, right? Now, I thought, I can't think a movie. So this is not part of the description. What it's doing is it's saying that, yeah, I'm not saying the movie was good generally. I'm just saying I thought the movie was good, right? So you're pulling that was good back a little bit. That's all it's doing. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with this? All right. I have one yes from Rahul. Yeah. So that I thought, right, Ankit? So we're basically discussing what role that I thought is playing in the sentence. I thought is just helping you understand that this is not an absolute statement. So when we say a movie that was good, right? A movie that was good is we're not pulling it back. So which is saying a movie that was good. It was good. There's no extra condition we're putting on that. When we say a movie that I thought was good, what we're saying is, in my opinion, it was good, but I'm not saying that it's generally good or that I expect everybody to find it good. Better? Excellent. Yeah, Manu, whatever I'm saying right now, that is not a complete sentence. Abhishek and Ujali, quick check. Is this okay? Abhishek's comfortable. Ujali?
No, I don't think I quite understand this still.
Got it. Let me give you another example. So let me first clarify which part we should be taking another look at. So is it the part where I said pulling something back, or is it even before that?
Um, no, I think it's even before that. So when you see a relative pronoun plus an
Mhm.
SVP, you said isolate the first SV combo. Check if the verb in the first SV combo is capable of describing the noun.
Right.
So if it doesn't agree with the noun,
Mhm.
we remove the first SV
Mhm.
and we read it as RP plus V.
Exactly. Exactly.
But then what?
So then you can recognize whether the structure is correct or not.
Okay. So if I did that for the example that I think it's one of the examples we discussed, the movie
Hmm.
that was good.
Hmm.
So what's wrong with the structure?
Okay, hang on. Maybe I should not have deleted that sentence. So let's say you get two options, right? What did we write? A movie that I thought was good.
The movie that you said was good.
Oh, yeah, right. Sorry, I changed the words. Like, it doesn't make a difference. So it's the same
Yeah,
thing,
it's fine. Yeah.
right? So in these sorts of cases, there are two things that I need you guys to watch out for. Let me just write this out. Yeah. The first one is I don't want to confuse you. So when I said that a relative pronoun can only be followed by a verb or a subject plus verb combination, if you see an SVV on the GMAT, right, you should not assume that you've got some new structure. So whenever you see SVV, right, it is never actually SVV. it is either SV plus a completely different verb which has nothing to do with the relative pronoun, or it is RP plus V. Oh God. Again, just hearing myself, I can understand how confusing what I'm saying is. One second. Let me think if I can put it in a better way. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. First is whenever you see an SVV, right? It's not actually SVV, it's something else. Agreed?
Okay.
Now, one possibility with an SVV is that you are actually looking at, so RP plus SVV could be RP plus V.
Okay.
When does that happen? When the first SV doesn't actually make sense with the noun,
Okay.
right? Or RP plus SVV could be RP plus SV plus some verb which has nothing to do with the relative pronoun. As in, it's its own free thing. That last verb, the second verb, is its own free thing capable of working with something outside the relative clause. Right? So if you see SVV, you could be looking at the first structure or you could be looking at the second structure, depending on whether that first verb is actually capable of combining with that noun. So if you see an SVV, it is not some new structure. That's the first thing. It is not some brand new thing which is breaking our very basic, most fundamental rule that after a relative pronoun, you should see only a verb or a subject plus verb. Because in the previous session, I asked you guys to remove any option that does not have that structure. Right? So what does the GMAT do sometimes? It gives you some fancy structure after a relative pronoun, right? And then we're wondering, is this possible or not? The answer to that is there are only two possibilities. Either you get a verb or a subject plus verb after a relative pronoun. If you see something else, you should remove that option.
Okay.
But if you see subject verb verb, then you need to reduce that subject verb to one of those two basic forms,
Okay.
right? After reducing it, if you find that the sentence is incomplete, then you still remove that option because then there is a
Okay.
new type of error.
Okay.
Right? But if after reducing it, you find that, yeah, this is the second structure and I have an extra verb now available for the subject, then you have a complete sentence. Then you don't remove that option.
Okay.
Okay,
Got
so
it.
that's what we're supposed to do with this SVV. Firstly, we should not automatically eliminate it, thinking that Ajitesh said, "Oh, you get only a verb or a subjectless verb, you don't get anything else." So we don't automatically remove it. We take one extra step to check: is this structure leading to a complete sentence or not? Better or not sure?
Yeah. No. 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 I think I get it now. But
So hold on. Let me do this using the example. One second. Let me remove all of this extra stuff that I've written. See, once you become
so now,
used to it, right, it'll sound very easy. RP, SVV. But right now, because it's the first time you guys are looking at it, it's going to sound very weird. So let's forget all of those things. Just look at it this way. After that, right, you've got something which can act as a subject, you've got a verb, and you've got a verb, right? In the second one, you've got a subject and a verb and a verb. Same thing.
yeah.
Now, when we see SVV after a relative pronoun, do we automatically remove that option because it breaks our fundamental rule that after a relative pronoun you can get only a verb or only a subject plus verb?
No, you read this as a movie that was good
Excellent.
in the first step.
So, excellent. Yes. So what do? You reduce this, right? You reduce the SVV to something else. So we reduce the first one to from RP. Okay, again, I'm going back to the same thing. Just bear with me. RP followed by SVV, you reduced it to RP plus V because you removed the first SV, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, in the second one, you decided that, hey, I can't remove the first SV, agreed? So you reduced the RP plus SVV to RP plus SV. Now we can see that both of these, neither of these is breaking our fundamental rule, right? That you can have only a verb or only a subject plus verb, right? So both of these are grammatically possible structures.
Yeah.
Now comes the final part. Sometimes they're going to make incomplete sentences using these types of structures.
Okay.
In the first sentence, because the first SV is not part of the description, what happens to the second verb? It needs to become part of the description.
Yeah.
So the description is a movie that I thought was good. That I thought was good is part of the description. Now, because the second verb has been gobbled up by the descriptive element, is there a verb left for movie?
No.
No, exactly. So you remove such an option.
Okay. Okay.
But in the second one, the second verb is now free. It is not part of the description. So it can combine with movie. That's why the second one is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
So you don't remove this option.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So the way this happens is if we are very good at reading sentences, right, then we will automatically get an idea. Am I looking at something that's incomplete or not? But if we can do what we're doing right here, then it happens within seconds. You don't have to spend any time thinking about it, saying it out to yourself twice, thrice. This will literally happen in seconds. It's almost like a formula that we'll be applying. Check. Better? Sounds okay? Or doubts?
Is there any example in the first part where we remove the first SV,
Hmm.
but it still is a complete sentence?
Say that again. Is there any example?
Uh, Wherein I would remove the first SV
Hmm.
and it'll still form a complete sentence.
No.
Okay.
No. So you need something after the relative pronoun, right? And the subject of the sentence will need a verb. So those elements have to be provided somehow. If they're not
Got it.
provided, then it's structurally incomplete.
Okay.
Awesome. Now we're going to consolidate over here. I'm going to give you one more example. This is the SVSV pattern. All right. Now, the movie that you claimed I would enjoy watching. Okay. Many subjects, many verbs, slightly longer than what we've been looking at till now. My question is the same. Is this a complete sentence or is it not a complete sentence? Okay, we have one answer from Manu. Take your time. No need to rush. Okay, so we have a second answer also. To get you guys thinking on the right lines, remember, if we are saying that it's a complete sentence, then the movie must have a verb of its own. The movie must have a verb. Rahul? Oh, okay. So I've got an answer from everyone. Perfect. Now, can anybody unmute and walk me through this, please? You're all correct, by the way. All of you are correct. I just want to hear the process, please.
So there is no verb for the movie. Like after that, you claimed is correctly pointing towards the movie that you claimed, and
Is it pointing to movie?
the movie that you claimed. No, 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 no. It is not pointing to the movie. So you can drop you claimed,
Very
and
good.
then we will be read with the movie that I would enjoy watching.
Right.
So we are not left with any verb for the movie.
Excellent. So we tackle SV the same way. We check the first subject verb combination. We check whether it makes sense with the noun. Is it possible to claim a movie? No. So mentally remove it. That's not part of the description. So the movie that I would enjoy watching is still just a movie. There is no verb available for the movie. And therefore, this is an incomplete sentence. No matter how many verbs you see in this entire construction, there is not a single verb available to the noun movie. And therefore, doesn't matter how many verbs you have, this is not complete. All
I did
right.
this slightly
Mhm.
differently, and I want to check
Mhm.
if that
Yeah,
works
yeah, please.
too. I underlined that you claimed, and I
Mhm.
said this is a relative clause. And watching like I is the subject, like watching is the verb for I, and hence
Uh,
movie has nothing left.
um, that is also a way to do it, but just remember the claimed part is not part of the description. So we can't literally claim the movie, right? Claim over here means you made a statement, or in fact, it just means you said. So this is like saying the movie that you said I would enjoy,
Hmm.
right? The movie that you said I would enjoy is basically saying the movie that I would enjoy according to you.
Okay, I think it's still better to follow the first structure that you said, like remove the
Yeah,
SV and then read
yeah.
it.
It's always the first
Okay,
SV that we need to focus on whether it makes sense with the noun or not, and then we think about whether we remove it or keep it as part of the description.
thanks.
Sir,
All right. Yeah,
sir, if
please
we
go ahead.
have the movie that you watched. Now, watched make sense with movie. The movie
Mhm.
that you watched, I would enjoy watching. So
Mhm.
in this sentence also, I think so. There is no verb for the movie.
There is no verb, and therefore it's not a sentence. Those SVV, in fact, are easier to recognize than SVV. That's
Okay,
why we focused on
and if we
SVV.
if we remove I then yeah, we get a verb for the movie. Would enjoy. Would
Yeah, yeah, but the meaning would be wrong. The movie would enjoy watching is wrong.
yeah, yeah, that would be a little absurd.
Awesome. All right, now we're down to the last point, and this is something that the GMAT has tested multiple times. We're going to make sure we do a good job on this.
Sir, the
Mhm,
both first sentences mentioned above, the movie that
mhm.
you said and the movie that you claimed, both are incorrect.
Both are correct
Okay.
because the verb was is there in both cases for movie. So basically, we're saying the movie was quite good. Which movie? The movie that you said would win an Oscar. That movie was quite good. Both of them have that.
Okay, but if it was the movie that you said was quite good, it would be incorrect. But
Hmm.
since there is an object after said would win an Oscar, then it's correct.
Yes, correct. All right. Now let's get to that last one. I see a lot of people approach this in, let's say, not very optimal ways. The last one. We're going to discuss it. We're going to see how to take the correct decision and how to do it properly. But let's start by understanding the issue over here. So he is one of the players who play well. Now, when you look at the sentence, you see a who over here. A who is a relative pronoun. Fair enough, that's pretty obvious. Now, some people say that all relative pronouns refer to the noun that is just before them, immediately before them. There is no rule in English like that. So there are all these fancy names that people come up with for this kind of stuff, the touch rule and whatnot. There is no such thing as a touch rule in English, in case you've heard that term. Nothing. In English, relatives can actually be quite flexible in terms of what they refer to. In our classes, again, this is something we'll discuss under preferences. So when we get to the preferences session, we'll discuss it again. But in our classes, the way we tackle this is if your relative pronoun is referring to a noun that's far away from it, that is a problem related to ambiguity, not related to impossible, like level one. It's not level one, it's level three. But anyway, that's a story for another day. That's for preferences. The point over here is a very specific point that the GMAT tests, and that is what is the who pointing to? Is it pointing to players or is it pointing to one of the players? If it is pointing to players, then of course players is plural, so we should go with play. If it is pointing to one is of course singular, so we should say plays. Now, how do you take this decision? I'll tell you how you should not take the decision. You should not take the decision thinking that, oh, yeah, players is right next to it, so players is the closest, so we'll go plural. That's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to take a meaning call. So, whenever you see one of, so one of plus plural noun followed by a relative pronoun, you need to ask yourself, what is the meaning? Is the sentence trying to tell me that I am looking at one of many? Or is it trying to tell you that you're looking at an exception? If the answer is that it is one of many, you will go plural. Otherwise, you will go singular. That's the rule we need to remember. If the intent of the sentence is to tell you that you're looking at one of many things, all of which share the same quality, you should go plural after the who. But if the intent of the sentence is to say that this thing is an exception, the other things don't have that quality, then after the who, you should go singular. Now let's take a look at the examples over here. He is one of the players who. Now, when you say he is one of the players who, what you're trying to say is there's a group of players, all of whom play well. Players, so let's call them good players. And he is one of them. Right? He is one of the players who play well. Therefore, we should try to go plural on this. But in the last one, what you'll see is he is the only one of the players. As soon as you say the only, remember, the only, that implies that he's an exception. The other players do not have that quality. And therefore, we should go singular after who. Quick check. Are we comfortable with this or not sure? Perfect. And also Abhishek? Yeah. Excellent.